My brother-in-law tried to move into my inherited lakeside cabin without permission, even after I said no. When I came up for a peaceful weekend, I found a moving truck in my driveway and his pregnant girlfriend setting up a nursery in my house. That was the moment I snapped, quietly, permanently. But like most betrayals, it didn't begin there. It began in the kitchen, over apple pie. It was a Sunday afternoon in October, the kind that smells like cinnamon and leaves. We were all gathered at my house, me, my daughter Nora, my sister Mara, and her husband Nick. The fireplace was on. My dog was asleep at Nora's feet. It felt warm, familiar, safe. Nick was telling us how hard things had been lately. They just found out they were expecting, and he'd lost a contract job 2 weeks prior. Mara looked tired but hopeful. And then he said it. So I was thinking, the cabin sitting empty, right? We could stay there for a bit, just until we get on our feet. He said it like he was asking for a cup of sugar. I was gentle but clear. No, Nick, I'm sorry, but that cabin, for Nora, it was Mom's. It's staying in the family, but it's not for that. He smiled, shrugged like it was no big deal. It was worth asking, he said. But I remember the way Mara stared at the pie, not touching her fork. That was the first red flag. The cabin was everything to me and my daughter. We'd spent every summer there with my mother until she passed. It was where Nora learned to swim, where we grieved my divorce, where we made it through so many firsts and finals and were okay moments. It wasn't just a house. It was the only place in the world that felt untouched. And it was mine now, legally, in my mother's will, but emotionally, spiritually, it belonged to Nora. That's why I told them no. I didn't expect to find a U-Haul in the driveway 4 months later. It happened the first weekend of March. I'd taken Friday off work, packed up groceries and Nora's old sketchbooks, and drove the 4 hours to the cabin. I wanted peace. Instead, I saw boxes on the porch, a dusty minivan in the gravel, a set of pastel curtains hung in the front window that I hadn't put there. And then I heard her, Nick's girlfriend, humming inside, a woman I barely knew, her pregnant belly rounded under a too-tight hoodie, arms full of stuffed animals. I stepped inside and saw a crib in the sunroom. Our sunroom. The one with the wooden beams and the handprints Nora and I had painted on the wall when she was 6. There was a bag of baby clothes on the floor, a diaper caddy on my mother's antique dresser, the bedroom closet half filled. My voice barely worked. What are you doing? She blinked like I was the intruder. Nick said you gave us permission. I turned and walked out before I said something unforgivable. That night I drove into town and stayed in a cheap motel. The anger didn't come in shouts, it came in waves. Shame, disbelief, betrayal, over and over again, like drowning. And then I remembered something even worse. Nora. Her behavior for the past few months. The way she'd stopped talking about college, how she'd told me she wasn't sure she needed to go after all, how she'd skipped her art portfolio review without telling me, how one night in January I found her crying in the garage, saying, maybe they need it more than we do. I thought it was about something else. I didn't know what. I didn't ask hard enough. When I got home, I searched everything, bank statements, emails, Nora's browser history. She had made a transfer from her savings, $7,800, the last of what we'd saved from Mom's small inheritance, and the college fund I'd built since she was born. The memo line, for cabin renovation supplies. My stomach dropped. I asked her about it that night. She didn't lie. She just looked so small, like someone who had done something shameful out of love. I didn't know what to do, Mom. Uncle Nick said you were just being stubborn, that you'd never actually use the cabin, that maybe it was better for the baby. He made it sound like I was being selfish if I didn't help. And Aunt Mara said, you'd understand eventually. My hands were trembling. She added, "I thought if I helped them get it ready, you'd come around. And if not, at least someone would get use out of it. I just wanted to keep the peace." She had tears in her eyes. And for the first time, I understood how deeply someone could be manipulated when they're trying to protect something they don't even realize is sacred. I didn't scream. I didn't go back to the cabin with rage in my pocket. I called a lawyer. I filed trespassing paperwork and had them served a formal eviction notice. I transferred the cabin into a legal trust, locking it to anyone but Nora. I called my sister and said 3 sentences. "You manipulated my daughter. You let your husband steal from her. We are done." She begged, said I was tearing apart the family. I said, then maybe the family was already broken. The cabin is ours again, whole again. It took months to clean out the nursery, to patch over what had been touched. But the sketchbooks are back on the shelf. Nora painted over the pastel curtains with deep indigo. We go up every other weekend. Sometimes we don't say anything. We just sit on the porch swing with tea and silence, and the sound of our own breath finally slowing down. She's applying to colleges again, art schools, places near water. The other night she said, "I didn't know what it meant to protect something until I almost gave it away." I hugged her and said, "Now you do."